I woke up Friday, March the 13th, yes, Friday the 13th, and looked back on the last couple of weeks and only to realize that several of my speaking engagements had been canceled and that our business was about to take a big turn. I know a lot of you had that same experience. So on Friday the 13th, we made a decision, you know what, let's just take a week off. Let's go to a little place in Locust Grove, which we did, and in doing that, thought, you know, we'll just have a week, a little R&R, and really not worry about the pandemic. Let's get out of town. So we drove out and ended up at our friend's house, Kevin and Rita's, and we, got there for dinner, had an amazing dinner, and sat around a round table. Nobody had masks on. We were talking about the pandemic, but not really paying enough attention, obviously, as you'll hear in this story. And so at the end of dinner, we, apparently laughed on each other, crucial to the story, had a lot of really good wine, had some really fun conversations, really kind of a typical Friday night. And so we went home. So after that, about the next 2 or 3 days, everybody from that dinner party, there were 8 of us total, started to show symptoms of coronavirus. And for the most part, it was headaches, sore throats. It wasn't really anything too dramatic, except for 2 of us. So Rick and I were the 2 unfortunate ones in the group that ended up with the near-death experience. So 104 fever and too many days in bed. And I can just tell you that, that week and a half really changed everything, not only for me personally, but certainly for our business. So about 6 weeks later, when I finally came out of all of that, went back to work. And so got on the phone with my business partner, Wally, and I said, so what's happened since I've been gone? And he's like, well, kind of a lot. And I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, well, let's see, you had about 40 speaking cancellations. That's 80% of our income as a business is gone. And we've become a virtual leadership training program company. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds good. I mean, like, is there a market for that? And he's like, I'm not sure. And I said, do you think we can monetize it? I'm not sure, but there's a lot of people that need our help. And I was like, okay. So we rolled our sleeves up, we reinvented ourselves, like many of you have had to do. And so I can tell you that transition really set us up for a very different business model. So the pivot we had to make, not unlike what you've had to make, really put us in a completely different direction. And there's been some of that that's been really, really good, and some of that's been really, really hard. And let's talk a little bit about those. One of the things that happened from that pivot for us is we took on a lot of clients into consulting manner. So we do a lot of executive coaching, and we do a lot of leadership turnaround coaching jobs as well. So I wanted to give you our observations about what the companies that have done this really well over the last 6 months, what they've done. What are some of the things that they've done to create and maintain high-performing teams? Because I think that's really what we're all trying to do. We're not trying to go back to the way things were, but we have to figure out what are the new strategies that we have to use so that we can be successful in the new environment. So here they are. The first one is simply this: focus on outcomes, right? Not on how-tos. When I think about the group of people, the 2 groups of people that probably have had the hardest time with this pandemic, it's going to be extroverts and micromanagers, right? Like extroverts, I mean, the idea of sitting at home or by yourself or in a room without being able to have any conversation, that's been really tough for our extroverted friends. And I actually have a friend that's an introvert, and because of all the downtime, I've had a little bit more time to reach out to some of my friends. And so I called her, it was her birthday. And she answered the phone, and she's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I was calling to wish you a happy birthday. It's your birthday. And she's like, oh my gosh. I thought maybe you couldn't breathe. I thought maybe the COVID was back. And I said, no, everything's good. And she's like, listen, I'm a texter, not a talker. So, next time, don't scare me like this. Just text me. I was like, happy birthday. So, I think for introverts, the idea of, sitting at their computer, maybe not having to interact, not having to listen to every single word that pops into the extrovert's head, at the work. I think they've actually done better. They've actually adapted probably a little bit better than everyone else. And so the micromanagers, here's the thing you have to know. Just because you're not seeing it, it's still happening. Right? I think it's really difficult if you are that person, that leader, that has to have your hand on everything. And so this has been a really great lesson. A lot of our executive coaching clients, this has been the thing that we're talking about. How can you lead in an environment where you can't just walk in and say, hey, give me an update, right? How can you lead in an environment where people are not checking in as often? You don't have that one-to-one communication, or do you? We'll talk a little bit about how to do that as well. And I think the thing that those leaders have to get really, really good at is answering a couple of questions. And one is simply this: what does success look like, right? In the new environment, how will we know if we're successful? How do we measure that? Do we have visibility to the results? What are some of the things that we can do to move the ball forward and do it in a way that people feel like they're part of something really special? And so I think the focus on the outcomes piece of the business is probably a muscle that every leader needs to build. It's a muscle that if you don't get in the outcomes and you're in the how-to part of this, you're always going to compromise the output of high-performing teams. So that would be the first lesson. The second one would be, and it's just pretty simple, it's just tell the truth. Now, this sounds like it's an easy one, but let me just ask you this. How hard has it been over the last couple of months to answer some of the questions that you're being asked? When will we go back to work? Am I going to have a job? What's really going to happen to our industry? Do you think we'll ever recover? Right, so all those questions, I think you have to be the truth teller in your organization if you're the leader. And by the way, let's define leadership as influence. So it's anybody that's in a leadership role at all, right? It's not just the person signing the check. It's all of us. If you supervise people and they're asking you hard questions, listen, you have to have a little bit of discernment here, right? I'm not saying that you have to tell everything you know, but I think we have to be so much better at telling the truth in this environment. And I'll tell you why. It's simply this. If you don't provide the information, the story that people will make up when there's a vacuum, when they're not getting the information, is so much worse than what the truth is, right? If you just tell the truth, then people are left to their own device to figure out how they're going to manage that. But we have to at least be willing to be brave enough to say, you know what, I don't know if we're going to have layoffs. I'm not sure what the new environment's going to look like. I have no idea if the pivot is going to be successful, right? Some of those really tough conversations. To build a high-performing team, you just have to be transparent. Listen, the gateway to trust is truth and transparency. And there's no other way to get to trust. You can't have trust without it, and you can't build a high-performing team without trust. So those are a couple of things to consider. I think Brené Brown, I'm a big Brené Brown fan. If we've ever had a conversation together, you'll know this. And one of my favorite sayings of hers is that to be clear is kind, and to be unclear is unkind. I think that's true. I think the more clarity we can provide our teams, probably the better. And I'm going to end by the 6 things very quickly. Focus on the outcomes, tell the truth, embrace technology, get the org chart right, diversity is the main ingredient, right, and then lead. And I don't know where your business is right now, but here's what I know. We're not going back to the way it used to be. That's not an option. We have to take everything that we've learned in the last several months and move those things forward and do it differently. Let's reinvent ourselves. Let's do things in a way that perhaps we probably should have done before, but we were on autopilot. That's been the great outcome of what's happened over the last 6 to 8 months. I can look ahead a year from now and see that, you know what, we're going to be in a really great place. And I hope the same for your business. Thank you.